All right, here goes.
This is a Two Fat Guys Pull List podcast.
And I gotta say, to people who hate on the Acolyte, show me a lightsaber battle in the last 20 years that rivals anything in that show.
Yeah.
And you can hate on it for all the other reasons that you don't like things. But I choose to, if I'm a Star Wars fan, yeah, I'm gonna have criticisms of stuff.
Origins of superpowers are always very interesting.
There's more to them than meets the eye.
We're opening the magnetic field.
Your real training begins now. Ready?
Stand by alert.
What up, comic fam? It's your boy Jim, and you're watching Secret Origin, a show where we interview comic book writers, artists, podcasters, and content creators about the one thing that we all love, the one thing that brings us all together, and that's comic books. Today, I'm joined by Chris Luby, a friend, a mentor, and more importantly, a content creator. How you doing, Luby?
Man, I am doing so good. First of all, a big fan of the show so far. The first 2 episodes have been great. I feel like I'm not going to live up to. You've had some great creators on the show, and I'm just a fan. I'm just over here making YouTube stuff and social media. I'm just silly goose time over here. Like, look at my toys, look at my comics.
Well, like I said before, like mentor. Like I learned a lot of stuff from you. When we worked at camp together, if obviously nobody knows, but I worked at a camp called Lone Hollow with Luby, and that's where I fell in love with doing videography and video editing, and then more importantly, collecting. I was already collecting said action figures and statues, and then found out that Luby was into that too. But we'll get into that later into the show. But before we start the bulk of the show, let's do our calibration section, or our vibe check, if you will, with some rapid fire questions. You ready to go?
Let's do this.
All right. So our first question is: who is the better billionaire, Tony Stark or Bruce Wayne?
I'm a Batman fan first, so I'm going with Bruce Wayne.
That's respectable. I get that. I think I would probably go Tony, but I'm growing closer to Bruce as I continue to read Batman comics. So I get that. Should the absolute DC line of comics be the main continuity storyline in comics now?
Honestly, so I haven't been a DC reader recently, like in the past few years. So this has been such a cool reset to start fresh. So I don't want to be arrogant and say yes, absolutely, for sure. But for me personally, it's the only books right now in DC that I'm really focused on.
Yeah, I would agree. I kind of want it to. I'm kind of tired of it. But anyway, all right,
it's so complicated. I mean, if you're coming in not reading all this stuff, I mean, sure, you can jump into some arcs and things, but as a whole, it's referencing so many things that I'm like, I feel like I'm missing it, so I don't want to join in.
Yeah, and I feel like Marvel can do that too, but at least with Marvel, it's just kind of like, it kind of glazes over and you just really buy into the storyline. So I think Absolute should be for it for sure.
That's how I felt with X-Men in the Krakoa era stuff. I tried, and then I just gave up, and I left comics for a while.
Yeah, there was too much. There was way too much. What's the most comics you've pulled on a new comic book Wednesday?
I think it was 16, and it's because my spouse was collecting all the Disco Dazzler variants. So, and a lot of them I was already getting the A cover book, and so then it was like, oh, but I also have to have a Doctor Strange Disco Dazzler. So,
yeah, the alternate covers, those are hard to pass up sometimes. Last question. It's the most important question, and I'm sure you've watched the show, so you know what's coming. Is oatmeal a soup?
No. Oatmeal is wet cereal.
Wet cereal. Okay.
It's wet cereal.
See, because I think I think cereal is cold specifically, and when you add the element of heat, I feel like it starts getting into the soup territory.
Still wet. It's still wet. Pour hot water on Cheerios.
Okay.
You got oatmeal.
All right. I think you may have cracked the code.
It's not going to be as good. But it's still.
Yeah, but add hot water and still cereal. Got it. All right.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Let's go ahead and jump into the main part of the show, the main questions. first up, we're going to ask, the most basic of questions. What was the first comic that made you fall in love with the medium?
I will tell you what the first comic book I ever bought was, because I actually still have it here with me. I talked about it. I've got a YouTube channel called Chris Collects, and the very first video on there is about the things that I collected and how I kind of got into it. And one time I went to the grocery store. It was like a Kroger's, I think. And next door to Kroger's, they opened up a place called the Newsstand. And my dad took me in there. This was 1991. And I'll tell you, there was a big event in 1991, and it caught my eye. And the guy was like, well, you got to buy this comic because this is the hot comic. And it was X-Men #1. And so I bought all the covers. And then for my birthday, my spouse got me a lot of the very first comic books I ever bought graded, regardless of how they were. It was just like a way to like protect them all. So X-Men #1. And then the other comic book, this is where I felt like that community feel with comics, because in 91, I felt like I was the only person I knew who was reading comics. I didn't have any friends that were really into it. And then I was on a Boy Scout camp out, and this kid named Thomas started like talking about this Wolverine book. And then he was like posing. He was trying to tell someone like, oh yeah, the cover's like this. And he's like, it's called Valley of Death. And I was like, holy crap, I have that book too.
That's awesome.
And this one, I was like, it was like, you went and graded this one? I was like, it's got all kinds of, I read this thing so many times. So those are the books. It was X-Men. I think that X-Men and Batman were my entry point. I was always a Batman fan before, but kind of when you're really little, the only thing that I knew Batman was from the 60s television show, and then in 1989 the movie. And it was sort of like, I guess I knew it was like a comic book, but I had no concept of what that was until I started buying books in 91 with X-Men.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think X-Men for me was probably where it was introduced. And I think I said that on a previous show that like, I remember buying comics, not necessarily reading them, just kind of like flipping through them and be like, well, this is a cool. It's only like obviously been recently with Nate where we've really jumped into it and really dived into the concept of comics. So yeah, I think X-Men has always been my #1 go-to as well. Next up, do you have a preference between Marvel, DC, or indie comics when it comes to reading them, or do you like a mix?
I have a preference. I do. I make mine Marvel. So, if I had to look at my entire collection, it's probably 70 to 80% Marvel. And I don't know why that is. I do like when I get into a good Batman arc or even Superman, Green Lantern, but not recently. I'm like, oh, these are really good. I really like this. But then I always tend to gravitate more over towards Marvel, and I always have.
Same way. I'm like 60% Marvel, maybe even 70. And I really think it's the storylines. I think they speak more to me. I have this conversation with my dad all the time, and he's more DC. And he grew up with DC. They're classic. They're a little bit more, I want to say corny, but like they just have a different style to them that Marvel just doesn't seem to have. And I don't want to say even edgy. I just think the storylines are just different. It's just, I think David said it on the last show. Marvel is jazz and DC is classical music. I think that's probably the best way to frame it.
I can see that. I remember though in the 90s, I feeling like Superman, Batman was very goody two shoes. And X-Men and Marvel was sort of like you're being a little rebellious. You're reading Marvel. I don't know why that was how I saw things, but you got, on one hand you got Boy Scout with a cape, and then this dude with knives for hands. Right. So it's like when you're 10, 11 years old, you're like, I want the guy with knives with hands. Like that's badass. That's what I want to read. It's hard to identify, as a teenager in the 90s with Superman. And I think, when we saw what happens, they had to kill off Superman and kind of reboot the whole thing.
And I think like even in today's comics, I think there's still kind of outside of the absolute, which we kind of touched on in our rapid fire. I think the classic storyline within DC is still pretty classic. I think it's just very cookie
cutter. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's not at all. But when you get a writer like James Tynion IV who does some edgy stuff, you really jump into that, and then you jump to another writer, and I'm like, it just doesn't feel the same. So I think there's to stay in that lane. There's nothing wrong with it, but yeah, I sway more into Marvel. That being said, indie comics, that is the biggest thing that I've come to know now with what I'm reading right now in the present is I never knew about indie comics, obviously, as a kid. I don't think they're even that big. I mean, Image was probably just getting started with like Spawn and all that stuff.
Right.
Now, every day, like every new show that we do, Image or indie comics seem to just creep in more and more in my pool.
Yeah, right now, I mean, for me on the indie side, I mean, the Power Fantasy is a book that I'm enjoying a whole lot. And then the whole Energon universe.
Oh my God.
I was reading a few, and then I went on a cruise not too long ago, and I loaded up my iPad because I knew there was those days at sea where I wanted to get away from the rest of the family. And we went up to the lounge in the middle of the day, and I just burned through Void Rivals and all of Duke and Destro, Cobra Commander, caught up on Transformers, and it's so good, especially a kid from who grew up in the 80s, who I used to sit my butt down on Saturday morning, get all of my Transformers out, put them in front of me while watching the show, and if I had the toy and if the character transformed, I was like, I gotta do it like with the character. So it's so good. The storyline has got me in. I'm interested to see where it goes, and I hope that they can bring this, I don't know, the feeling of this whole Energon Universe series to the big screen, because we know that they're going to do that G.I. Joe Transformers movie. Hasbro and all, they've announced that and everything, and I worry that they'll forget that they have this great story and lore and stuff that's being built right now that they could bring to the big screen.
If they do hint to Void in the movies, if they hint to the Void rivals in the movies, that's going to be massive, especially if you've been collecting those comics. Holy hell, like that's going to be insane. What are some of your favorite comic book writers, artists, and what makes their work stand out to you?
I'm going to be real honest. When I started reading comics, I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't paying attention to the artists, to the writers. So this has been, for me, getting back into comics in the way that I have just recently. Getting to know the artist was so I mean, I feel like all the people that I know, I mean, Jason Aaron with what he's doing with Absolute Superman, I like him. I like John Boy Myers, the art that he's done. Got a few of his Energon universe covers. But what I've been enjoying the most in this kind of new era for myself of getting back into comics, because just some reference, like I collect a lot of things, and my focus will be like Star Wars, all Star Wars action figures, and then it'll kind of migrate over and stuff. And then it wasn't until like earlier this year that I pulled out my comics from the garage and started kind of going through them. I got an app. I put all the books in the app, and then there's a new comic store that opened just like literally around the corner from my house. And so this has been like kind of almost a renaissance for myself of like learning about the books, learning about the people. And so I don't want to, I feel kind of in that way, that question, I'm a noob. Like I'm curious. I'm discovering that I do have a taste. I'm like, oh wow, this was written by the same guy as this last book that I read. And so, yeah, I guess that's my answer.
No, that's perfect. I mean, I think me and Nate are both in the same boat where like we've obviously had a couple years to like really digest who's currently out there, and Nate more so than me in the sense of like going back and reading back issues. Like he's jumped on a lot of classic writers and artists. But yeah, like I've been on that same journey of just like learning about the industry itself, and seeing how writers will jump on or off, or even artists. Like that's one thing that I'm sure you've watched the live shows where we get kind of picky about the fact that artists jump off, and I can't wait to get an artist on just to see like their perspective on why they jump off books. Whether is it budgetary, is it time, what is it? So that's one thing to look out for. So I totally get that answer. Speaking of collecting, what is your favorite thing to collect?
Right now it's comics. But the longevity of the thing is going to be action figures. It's primarily Star Wars. I have recently started picking up more Marvel Legends, some of the DC multiverse stuff. But it's always been, I just need, like, I like the physical, it's you get to live in this fantasy world in your brain and with imagination, especially when you're, a kid and you're reading, and it all exists here. And then there's something about being able to like hold a little piece of that in your hand. And that's always been a thing for me, action figure collecting, up until about college, because somebody in a speech class one time, that we had to do a thing where it was like introduce a person, and so that you talk to the person, and he introduced me, and he said something about how I had action figures in my dorm room, and people he called them dolls or toys or something, and I felt shamed, and so I put all this stuff on pause. And then 2008 comes around, James, and you're off. We were talking about camp mentioned earlier, and so you're on an off duty night, and you're at Walmart, and the 30th anniversary collection came out, and I hadn't bought a Star Wars toy in like probably nearly a decade.
Yeah.
And then you're like, "Oh, Luby, I thought you might like this," and I was like, "Damn it!" It was like giving an ex-smoker a cigarette and saying like, "Here, just one, just take the one, you'll be fine." And so it's a little bit of your fault, but but on a good, but in a good way, way.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. So like for some context, when I was working at camp, prior to camp, also I was in college, and I was buying Star Wars action figures like in the mass. Like I was collecting any and all clone and stormtroopers. If you went into my dorm room, I had shelves of action figures, like just the 3.5 inch clone troopers, and I was any color, any battle battalion, whatever you want to call it, I had it. And then I getting into camp, meeting you, and we were talking about Star Wars, and then obviously went on that night, and I saw Darth Vader. I was like, he can put it on his desk, it'd be great. And so I know that
I never opened it.
Well, and that's the other thing I want to talk about is, as the stuff that the figures you collect. Like the other question would be, is there a feeling of guilt or pleasure when you open one up? Because right now, if you look at my office, and you can't see it over here, but like my walls are littered with unopened action figures with like the original card. And it's just because I'm like, no, I like the way it looks. Like it's more, I like it this way. But there's a part of me that's like, I really want to fucking open that toy. And so I'll end up buying like a second one to open sometimes. And like, I know that's, my wife hates that shit, but like, it's just, it is what it is.
It's the SNL Star Wars skit where it's like one to keep, one to open, and one just in case.
Right.
So Black Series, if it's just something I picked up at Walmart, or it's just a common figure, it's opened, and it's in the calyx. It's in I've got them displayed. I rotate them through because I don't have the space for it. If it's vintage collection, it's on that card back. That's to me that packaging is, like you said, is part of the appeal of it. So like those Marvel, the only reason why I opened this Moon Knight Marvel Legends, like the retro line, is because the card came from Amazon and it was all messed up. And I was like, well, it was $9. I'm opening it. He sits on my desk. The rest of them are still on the card. But sometimes, don't you ever feel like if you're just having like a bad day, and you're just like, but then you go to the box of the stuff that you've like I have a crate underneath my desk that it's full of vintage collection, and I have on occasion just opened it up and looked at it and been like, you know what, I'm what's the Taylor Swift lyric where it's like, I'm so depressed I act like it's my birthday every day.
Yeah. No,
I'm just like, I'm gonna open this, and it feels like it's my birthday, and for like 5 seconds or 5 minutes later, I feel good about life and the world around me.
I've got two, like, they re-released Street Shark action figures, and I look at them and I'm like, I could open it, and I don't. And then my sons come into my office, they're like, are you ever gonna open that? I'm like, I don't know, like I don't really want to, but then I kind of do at the same time. So tell me a little bit about the channel, that Chris Collects channel.
Yeah, so I was struggling to like figure out a name, and I think that's what was keeping me back, because I have all this. I have this collection hobby, and I really wanted to share it. It's one thing to just, to show your significant other, like, hey, look what I bought. But I really was like, I want to do something. I want to, share this and make this part of the hobby, that I'm not just buying stuff to have. It's looking for treasures and stuff. So yeah, it's Chris Collects because I'm Chris and I collect. It's on YouTube. I think I had to pick, well, I'm sure you'll put a link to. It's like Chris Collects Stuff. I think that's my handle because there was like a ton of others. But the first video, like I said, is me talking about my collection, the stuff that I collect. From the first things that the first things I collected, which were the Marvel trading cards from 1991. I took that binder with me in 5th grade, like everywhere. I mean, I would open it up and I'd just be like, oh, I got the Wolverine because I bought them individual packs from the newsstand next to the Kroger. But I also talk about I'm a big collector of VHS tapes. So I have it all logged because in my opinion, my philosophy is it's not hoarding if you know what you have. So
I like that.
if you have an inventory, you're not a hoarder. You have a full collection. You know what you got. So
100%.
I talk about, I've got videotapes, physical media that I talk about, Pulp Fiction stuff from the 30s. I really have gotten into characters like the Phantom, Doc Savage, the Shadow, and what I find the most interesting, and I'm going to do a video about it on my YouTube channel, is how those characters like the Phantom, especially Doc Savage, how they have so many of like the proto characteristics of our current superheroes. Doc Savage, in my opinion, is both Batman and Superman, and it predates both of those characters. So much, in fact, that Doc Savage has the Fortress of Solitude.
Yeah.
And then they didn't even like, Superman comes along and he's got a Fortress of Solitude and they didn't even bother changing the name. It's literally the same thing. And what's weird when you watch the Doc Savage movie from the 70s, not only is it not very good, but like he pulls up to his Fortress of Solitude in a snowmobile with his logo on the snowmobile. And there's like a sign outside that says Fortress of Solitude. It's so funny, but I've been hardcore like collecting these 70s reprints of the Doc Savage run. There's 180 of these. I'm not going to own them all. I've just allowed myself to be okay with that.
How do you feel about the current state of like collecting culture, and more specifically the bare shelves at Walmart, Target, and any other store that you go to try to find something in the wild?
I think the part of it that's fun for me is the actual hunt, and I think why maybe my collecting habits have made that shift into comics is because of the certainty that I'm going to be able to get the things that I'm looking for. And now it feels pointless. I go to Walmart and there's still vintage collection Landos swinging the pegs for the past 5 years. They don't clearance them out. They don't get rid of them. And it's like, do you want a Lando or do you want Fifth Brother? It's the same stuff everywhere. And I don't know how you fix it, because it doesn't seem like Hasbro has a problem getting Transformers products and keeping that updated. Those are always full. And I'm like, well, why can't Hasbro get the Star Wars and Marvel? I have yet to see a Deadpool and Wolverine figure in stores. And those are characters that it's not that like you could say, oh, well, we had to keep it secret. We couldn't start on the action figure process. It's Deadpool and Wolverine. You know what Hugh Jackman looks like. Make the figure, get it ready. So when the movie comes out, and I was about to say, like, when a kid sees the movie, they shouldn't see it, but they did.
Yeah.
They go to the store and they get their toy. That's how you build a fandom in the future. I feel like right now, companies like Hasbro, Mattel, they realize that the people buying their toys aren't kids anymore. And so they don't have to price it in that, $5, $6, $7 range, because they know the kids aren't buying it. It's us.
Yeah, it's us. And then, I think it's twofold. One, we'll just pre-order it and we'll ship it to you. Okay, cool, I guess. And that kills the collecting aspect, I think, in some aspects. But the other is, I think they're afraid to to honestly overproduce. I mean,
have you been to an Ollie's? Have you been to an Ollie's?
No,
like,
I haven't, and I've been wanting to.
It's just like, do you want this one? Do you want, like, if you want any Black Panther 2, the Wakanda Forever figures, they have boxes and boxes. I mean, it's just solid rows of one figure. They make plenty. The problem is they don't get it to the shelf in time for us to want to buy it. And then it ends up at Ollie's, and then it makes the price of the, in the secondary market for a lot of this stuff go, crater, because there's just so many of them. That's why I have really enjoyed collecting comics again, is not only am I guaranteed the stuff that I, put on my, when I do the FOC and I put my order in and I have my pull list, but then like the fun part is my store opens before I have to go to work. So I go to the store and I stand in line, and I'm with the other guys that are always there at 8:30 in the morning. And then we all like beeline it to the spot where like the incentives are. And so it's been kind of fun just to like have that adrenaline rush once a Wednesday.
That's something that the collecting, when it comes to like figures or anything outside of that, is kind of missing now, because it's just not existent either. They're not giving them enough, or there's a scalper who's has some kind of deal with somebody at the store that's like, hey, when these come out, I'll slip you a 20, you give me the entire box, I get the chase. Like that sucks for me. I know that exists also in the trading card movement. Like,
oh, absolutely. Everywhere. Anytime I think there's a collectible, there's a store, I got a friend that works and we pull it in the back and all of that.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's definitely a distribution issue, and it's just way more fun to find it on the shelf.
I agree. Like, I found a Spider-Verse action figure that I've been looking for that just came out, and like, I shit you not, like when I saw it, I was like, oh, like I literally freaked out and I grabbed it and I just like held it tight. I was like, that's
so much fun. That's the fun part. It's right. Not ding dong and it's UPS and it's like the thing that I pre-ordered, 6 months ago. The only joy that comes out of a pre-order showing up at your house is like, oh, I forgot I even bought this. It's this surprising, past self, surprising future self for a toy. But when you walk into like a GameStop or a Walmart or a Target, and as you're approaching and you see the thing that you've been looking forward to for so long, that's that 10-year-old magic, that 10-year-old like energy, that thing that kid inside you that gets excited for seeing the thing on the shelf, and you've got that $5 you got from mowing the yard. Like, that's it.
All right, let's go. Let's travel back to comics. What's your most controversial comic book opinion?
That Star Wars comics aren't very good.
Okay. All right.
Because, and here's why. Nothing happens. Nothing of consequence happens in the Star Wars comic books.
Okay.
I mean, just in the main lines, yeah, sure, there's stuff that happens. But none of it to me adds to my movie experience. In the same way that, like, when I saw Rogue One, I saw A New Hope differently because I saw Rogue One. And then the other thing too is they have these like adaptations of like Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and it's beat for beat. And you have a medium where you could expand certain things, or you could add to it. You could make these books more of a companion piece to the show, kind of in the way that the novelizations did for The Last Jedi and for Rise of Skywalker. The novelizations were this expanded look. And I just feel like they're afraid to actually do something that has ripples or repercussions in the main Star Wars lore.
Yeah, no consequence. I totally agree with that. I don't think I've ever said that whenever we've reviewed those kinds of books on the show, but that's like dead on. Like, there is no consequence to those books.
None.
I wish Nate was here because I'm sure he'd have something to say. But
I'm sure, yeah.
At the same time, I would be like, tread carefully, because you've got a guy here who is basically the Jedi Knight of Star Wars lore over here. I would love to hear your take on the current state of Star Wars itself. Like, how do you feel about it? I know that's a massive can to open.
It is, and it's a little bit it's kind of landmine, because it's not just I would love to only talk about it from the stance of like what the media itself is. And that's how I will answer this question. But I do know that there's so much political, and just the way that you view culture and values that kind of gets like put on Star Wars. And even though and Star Wars isn't even. It's not. It's it. I'm gonna pause right there. I love all Star Wars.
Right.
I love all Star Wars, even the comics, because I buy them. I'm reading the Ewok one right now. But it's the timidness almost of some of it that they play it safe. I feel like the first season of Mandalorian, because they didn't know what the reaction was going to be, I felt like that first season was a little more edgy, that they were really trying to like do something that felt true to the Star Wars from the 70s, but also new. But I think as it grew in its mainstream success, I think Lucasfilm, Disney, they played it safe a little bit. And I think the same thing kind of happened with Obi-Wan, even with Ahsoka. And I got to say, to people who hate on the Acolyte, show me a lightsaber battle in the last 20 years that rivals anything in that show.
Yeah.
And you can hate on it for all the other reasons that you don't like things. But I choose to, if I'm a Star Wars fan, yeah, I'm going to have criticisms of stuff. There's going to be episodes that I feel like are filler or an issue of a book. Like I was subbed to the Ahsoka book. And then after like 2 issues, I was like, the interior pages, no knock to the artist, but they felt rushed. They felt unfinished. They felt kind of just like as if almost no one's going to read this. Like they're
just get it done.
Just get it done. Just get it out there. Let's get our thing and all of that. So I think that we're in a inflection point. I think Star Wars is going to have to do some stuff to earn back some of the fans that it's lost. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be something that is Star Wars as an event, and it has lost that. And I think, and I don't know, if it's because they just keep redoing the same story, because they're like, well, we know what works, so let's not try to do something new. And then they try to do something new, and everybody's like, I don't like this new thing. So it's hard. It's hard being a Star Wars fan right now.
I think I've been in the same camp too, of just kind of like, I'm just glad we have Star Wars. I'm glad that we get something.
Yeah.
That sentiment of it used to be an event. I totally agree with that. I think, the most recent trilogy, and I say recent, it's been a while. It seemed to be that we were promised something new, and there are hints of things that are new, but it's really just the same story. And it just doesn't feel like there is any risk taking, and the risk taking that was taken feels cheap, and that's unfortunate. But outside of that criticism, I'm right there with you. Like, I'm just glad we get Star Wars stuff, just like I'm glad we get Marvel stuff. Like, I think Star Wars and Marvel both cinematically are in the same boat. They're just kind of like, they're too afraid to move. And then like, okay, we're getting, like, you can feel like there's something coming. There is something coming from the studio, from Disney, saying, all right, guys, get ready. We're about to just blow the lid off. And I'm here for it, obviously.
I'm excited for Doomsday and for Secret Wars. I think the multiverse thing was fun. But like, I want my X-Men in the main MCU. Wolverine and Deadpool kind of scratched the itch.
Yes.
But they're still the old Fox mutants. I want to see the MCU version of it. I know that we're going to continue to see Hugh Jackman until he's 90 years old, playing Wolverine. And I'm actually, of all the characters of recasting, I feel like just leave Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. And then when Secret Wars happens, we can, clean the slate. We don't have to see Wolverine. He doesn't have to be a part of the X-Men when they come back at first. Give it some time. At first. Yeah, I don't know.
Totally agree. No, I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. If you could retcon a storyline, what would it be and how would you change it? and let's broaden it. It doesn't necessarily have to be comics. It can be movies or TV.
If I could retcon anything, it would be this is going to be a weird cut. I mean, I think people are going to be like, what is he even talking about? I don't even know. It would be it would somehow be to not make season 2 of Sequest the season 2 of Sequest that it was, because season 1 of Sequest is very science. It was very based a little bit more. It was more grounded. X-Files comes out the same year as Sequest, and everybody's talking about the paranormal, and so season 2 shifts and it becomes very monster of the week, weird, supernatural. There's psychics on the show now, and the ratings drop, and then they bring it back season 3 and it's all military, which I did like that. And they changed, they took out Roy Scheider and put in Michael Ironside as the captain, and I really enjoyed that. But I would love to see what the Sequest run would have been like had they not swung so wildly season 2 and lost a lot of their fan base from season 1. I would hope that it would have gone on for like 7 seasons. I would have a massive, box set behind me. But it's forgotten. And I think Sequest, I will say this until either they make it or I'm put in the ground, that I think Sequest is a great show that could be easily rebooted. The majority of the show takes place aboard a ship, so all you gotta do is build that one set, and that makes an easy to afford television show when everything can kind of take place on a submarine, which is what they call some episodes of television where everything takes place within a certain building. So yeah, I would think that's my retcon. If I could change anything, it would be season 2 of Sequest not being season 2 of Sequest.
I love that. I think, who owns the rights to Sequest? Do we know? What studio?
It's Amblin and Universal.
What are we doing? Get it going. I think that'd be great.
You got Peacock over there. Everybody's got their sci-fi. Paramount's got their Star Trek. Disney Plus has their Marvel and Disney. Let's see, Max has all the DC comics.
Yeah.
Peacock's over here. Oh, and you got Amazon with The Boys and all that.
Right.
Peacock, you got Sequest, dude.
I totally agree.
I'm gonna call up Mr. Peacock and
there you go.
Get him on the phone.
We need to get like a hashtag trending, bring back Sequest.
Can we? I made a meme a while back during the whole Snyderverse. And I was like, bring back the Scheiderverse. Because Roy Scheider, anyways, right. It mildly went viral, and by viral I mean like maybe 30 retweets. But to me that was huge. No one ever did that.
I think bring back a reboot Sequest movement starts right here, episode 3 of Secret Origin. Let's do it right now. So
this
comment
is the
down
origin.
below. Yeah, get it out there, guys. Let's do it. All right, Luby. Well, this was an awesome conversation. I'm so glad you were able to jump on with me. Let everybody know where they can find you and your content.
Sure. You can find me on YouTube. It's Chris Collects Stuff, the @ Chris Collects Stuff. And then I will have some social media and stuff to support that channel soon. I haven't set that stuff up. This is all brand new to me. So bear with me. But yeah, just do a search for Chris Collects Stuff in YouTube and you will find my first video. And I've got some trading cards I've opened. I'm going to do some haul videos. And then I went to a cool shop in San Antonio. And so I shot a video while I was there. So that's the next one that's coming up. So
awesome. Well, I'm really looking forward to it.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it.